You wanted to see my ride, so we'll take a second to introduce you. Hey Panzer, what do you think, buddy? Good boy. Started off life as a 1985 Chevrolet one-ton four-wheel drive. Well, I added the four-wheel drive part. So, meanwhile, I'm Joe. That's Panzer. This is the Jolly Green Giant. So, I used to work for a junkyard in North Carolina where I ended up with the truck. It was a two-wheel drive automatic. Came out of Pennsylvania. So as you can see, the body was gone. This is the second body. I'm currently looking for another one. Maybe a third. Truck bed, once it wore out, tore it off. That's a M105 trailer off a deuce and a half. So we took about 6 inches out of the rear and about 6 inches out of the front. Pushed it together and off we go. Made a fine dump bed. Rear axle is a 14-bolt cabin chassis only, so it's that narrowed 14-bolt that's like super narrow. So I can still run duals and fit it underneath the regular bed, but if a regular bed, you got to tub the fenders out. Scored enough stuff in the salvage yard to make it a four-wheel drive. It's got a twin-stick 205 transfer case, NV4500 transmission, and if your ears are pretty good, you probably recognize that Cummins as it pulled up. 2001 Cummins. Later on, I got rid of that VP44 and put in a P7100 injection. So, tore the engine down at about 550,000, rebuilt it, 20 over on the pistons, shaved the head, 75 horse injectors, put in, like I said, the heavier lines with the P7100, spooled that P7100 up just a little bit, ATS exhaust manifold, a PDR, HX3540 hybrid turbo, and a Banks Big Hoss intake. And yes, we're still running the original factory grid heater because it gets a little cold out here. So, I'll show you a few other modifications on the inside. Okay, NV4500 out of the Dodge. Twin stick from ORD, Off-Road Design down to Colorado for the transfer case. We used a Dodge 6-bolt round pattern transfer case, but we put Chevy guts in it. And then shot it out to the rear drive shaft. Rear drive shaft, it's got 1410 and 1480 U-joints in it. We kind of started blowing U-joints out with that Cummins pretty quick. Truck itself has over 260 something thousand miles on it on the original odometer. Everything in here, factory gauges and all still work, and still has the original factory stickers on it from the Department of Transportation. Running boost gauge and pyrometer up on top with a shelf. I got the off-road radio in there, of course. No air conditioning. I was going to plan on putting that in sometime later on, but for those of you guys that recognize that, that's a Jake brake switch. Yeah, we are running a Jake brake with the Cummins exhaust brake here. Fabricated in with the floorboards. Like I said, we cut just in front of that center brace in the cab and flattened the floorboards out to fit that Chevy 05 seat in. And then this was the real turkey back here. It was an 07 flip down out of an extended cab. Had to modify these bracket systems down here in order to get it completely to fit in there. Best part is it folds up and gets out of the way. Locks in place. Get in. And can't forget the dog bowl in there too. So you like your truck, don't you, buddy? As you can see, it's kind of why we're putting it in the mint category, and I'll explain a few of the others here in a second. Body's pretty well gone for the second time in a row. Rocker panel's completely shot. When I modified the seat to a 05 front Chevy front seat and an 07 rear seat, fold down, we ended up flattening the floorboards and worked it over. Put a 5-ton dump cylinder in with a scissor arm assembly out of an old hay trailer or grain trailer. And also moved in the 40-gallon Suburban fuel tank. Move you guys in for a closer look here. Modified in, got rid of the old saddle tanks that used to sit up front up here. And the crossover switch, problematic with the Cummins. Cummins sucks fuel, it doesn't push fuel. And got rid of that electronic fuel pump that was computer controlled for the 24-valve Cummins when we did the P-pump swap. So this is a 40-gallon tank out of like an 89 Suburban. Retrofitted into the frame rails, ended up having to make my own brackets in there and put it in. Again, we're using braided stainless line from Summit with the AN, reusable AN fittings, and a draw straw 2 in the tank itself. Figured out the wires for the sending unit and got it going. Had 2 different locations for the filler neck. Originally ran it out the front, but it wouldn't take fuel over about half, 3/4 of a tank. So ended up capping and welding that off, put it back in the factory location, and then ran it up here to French it in for a filler neck out through the edge of the bed here. Because sticking it out just underneath, it was not taking fuel there either. It was too much of a flat angle. Anybody familiar with those old Chevy tanks, they know that's a pretty common problem with the old saddle tanks in a fleet side bed. Dump cylinder assembly, like I said, was a 5-ton. Got it out of a company in California, which the name escapes me right now. Ended up having to do a lot of extra gusseting and bracket work through here to support the dump bed. Swapped in and used a FS 1212 filter head from Cummins. Again, ran my JIC to Boss fittings on both sides and ran my 8AN line straight in. So I got a full 1/2 inch of uninhibited fuel flow going up to that engine. Ended up doing some reinforcing and ended up cutting out for the edge of the bed here, reinforced through when I had to put the dump cylinder in. And it's all controlled by a button on the dash, or a button on the handheld remote control. And the gooseneck ball with a flip trap door in the bed. So, one more little tidbit while we're back here. Yes, that is 4-wheel disc brakes. Modified those in, used a retrofit kit from TSE, Street Rod Manufacturing Company out of Colorado. And so they worked out okay, just the lack there of a parking brake. They kind of want you to use the Eldorado calipers from off an old Cadillac, have a ratchet system. But I found out those don't work very well. The rear axle is 14 bolt. It's been re-geared to 373, as is the Dana 60, and the front's been re-geared to 373. So we do pretty good, about 2200 RPM at 65, 70 miles an hour. I have swapped out the larger studs so that if I need to run a wheel spacer, I can. I just honestly don't believe in them very much. A little bit more on the rear end here. We modified the original military tail lights to go 12 volt instead of 24. Put in a gusset and a brace there in between the frame rails, and built the hinge system from scratch. That came, I've got a local machinist just up the road from me, and so we built these big pockets to kind of clamp around and bolt into the actual frame itself, and put grease zerks in on the back side, and then was able to mount my trailer hitch, wiring and all right here in the edge. So worked out pretty good. Tractor work light for a backup light. Got another one. It just hasn't quite migrated its way from the shop onto the back of the truck yet. So future mod, I want to figure out another latch system for the tailgate so I can do spread dumping. I've had 3 tons of gravel in the bed of this truck at one time, and the old Cummins hauled it home like it wasn't even there. 65 mile an hour, over 40 miles from the gravel pit back to my house here. Not a hiccup one bit. I just kind of start worrying about my suspension at that point, but the old Cummins will certainly handle it pretty easily. Shooting the bed of the truck right here. Again, we got the trap door for the gooseneck ball and Frenched in pocket for the filler neck there. There's a Ramsey winch that I pulled off an old tow truck and mounted in the bed up there. Comes in handy with annual elk hunting trips or dragging in whatever piece of garbage or junk treasure I can find. I mean, as you can see, there's a 5-ton over there, and there's an old 871 Detroit right there. Rich, I think you've gotten really intimate with the Detroit, the 16-cylinder in particularly. Took 6 inches out of the rear and I think 6 inches out of the front. You can sort of still see where some of my welds are that I didn't finish up and grind away. Ran a straight 4-inch exhaust with a small muffler and a resonator. Mounted the pump for the dump box and assembly back up in here on the side of the frame rail. The plan was to put toolboxes on either side, but at $400 a piece, $300 or $400 a piece, that kind of gets waylaid pretty quickly. Again, the truck was a 2-wheel drive originally, so I ended up having to take the bracket system off of a 4-wheel drive and retrofit it onto this frame rail. The 2-wheel drive sits up a lot higher, so it allows the chassis to sit a lot lower. So again, just having to modify one piece at a time with a good old Johnny Cash Cadillac at this point. So as you can see, there's still a lot of rust. If anybody knows where there's a good cab assembly, send it my way. This is the second cab that's been on this truck. I'm looking for a third. Honestly, haven't even considered getting a hold of a Suburban and then modifying the back so to make it more of an extra cab, but I'd have to lengthen the chassis, and that's not out of the question yet. With everything we've done to this truck before, there is no bolt on this truck that I have not turned. So modifying for a extra cab, crew cab, dump box won't be out of the question. Possibly. Used Atlas spring out of Grand Junction, Colorado. This is a 2,000 pound spring. They will custom bend them. This is actually sitting on a 3-inch lift, but that Cummins weighs 1,300 pounds by itself, so it does kind of squash that front end down quite a bit, especially with about 500 pounds worth of front bumper. Front bumper is my own design, a 6-inch channel iron wrapped around with 4-inch channel iron extensions off the frame, then diamond deck and 2-inch in between, completely fabricated from scratch. I had a winch mounted up here in the front and then relocated it into the bed, and just haven't brought another winch back up and put it on the front yet. But I had it on detachable posts that I could lift the whole mess off and take it to another truck or trailer. So far I think we're up to 11 deer that I've hit with this thing, and not a scratch, 2 of which were at 65 mile an hour. So just never let up, whacked him off down the highway we flew. So, which is a far cry from my little Toyota. It ran into one last fall, and there it sits dead on its axles. Alright, so we used the Dodge intercooler and snuggled it in underneath the core support here. Had to saw out the core support area and reinforced and gusseted it with some 2-inch tubing in here, and made some brackets to mount the intercooler where it would be in a factory location on a Dodge for the most part, in retrospect to the Chevy front end here. Behind that I used the Dodge factory radiator, and so down below I ended up having to reinforce the undersection of the core support and plate steel it with some reinforcement out of angle iron and drilled appropriate pocket holes. I can't really get the camera down in there to show you exactly what we did, but used the little rubber biscuits that come on the factory mounting system in the Dodge version. Maybe you can see the actual mounting system in there, maybe not. The plan was to put the condenser back in for the Chevy or the Dodge version, one way or the other, and be able to hook up AC, but it's been 10 years and over 100,000 miles on this engine, this truck, so it's one of those things that is probably not going to happen anytime soon. Moving underneath here, I had to modify that front frame cross member, and kind of, I hate to admit it, but yeah, we sort of patchworked it and never went back and redid it. It's solid. It's been holding for many, many years now. Relocated the sway arm, the sway bar, put in off-road design detachable shackles there for the sway arm. And again, being it was a 2-wheel drive automatic originally, I had to completely measure and figure out where all these spring perches and mounts and all that was going to go. Off-road design, center link here, I was getting death wobble, so we beefed that up to their 1.5 inches, 1 3/4, and haven't had a problem with it since. The Cummins fit in there pretty well. I had to modify that under engine cross member. That's all completely fabricated from scratch, as is the plate on the passenger side for the axle right there. So had a little help from a buddy on that one too. Alright, so we've been all the way around it. Now you want to see the good stuff. You want to see what's under the hood, I'm sure. Alright, I'll pop the hood. We'll meet you in the engine bay. Okay, Banks high ram intake manifold, or intake horn. We ended up having to run a little bit of a 3/4 inch spacer here above the grid heater. Yes, I'm running a grid heater. It gets cold out here in Wyoming. That was in order to clear these shied lines running out of the P7100 injection pump. This is a 24 valve out of a 2001, and I ran that VP44 for a long time, but I decided I needed to get rid of the computer controlled. So we ended up finding a junk 12 valve, pulled it out of a bus, what a nightmare that was, and robbed enough parts off the front to convert the front cover into P7100 injections pump in here. So originally the truck had a 6.2 diesel in it, so the power hydro boost was already there. This is my first Cummins swap, and like I said, it was in '09, so a little over 10 years ago now. Beat out the firewall a little bit, sandwiched it down in there, completely fabricated my engine mounts on the frame, as a lot of that stuff was not really much in existence 10 years ago when this was going down. Used a Dodge radiator. Later on, come back and mounted in the Dodge fan shroud, washer jug, and the coolant jug over here as well. PDR, Piers Diesel Research, HX3540 hybrid turbo, along with ATS exhaust manifold, and I put the Jacobs Cummins exhaust brake on here. Now this has been modified as well. Originally this can was angled back towards that firewall and it wouldn't fit, so I actually had to cut it loose from its mounts and rotate it about 90 degrees to fit it in here again, and then hard mount it down on its own housing again. Tighten up the rod, welded up the blowhole, so when you hit that Jake brake switch, it really starts blowing you down if you're used to a factory Jake brake installed on a factory Cummins truck. This thing takes a time and a half again. Tore the engine down at about 550,000 miles. 20, punched the cylinders out 20 over. Shaved the heads. I got ARP head studs. I got studs on the rockers for Paisley. And went in, pretty much bottom end stayed stock on that one. The MV 4500 transmission that was originally behind the Dodge, we been through it twice. So it shelled the main shaft in Missouri, and I was sitting in a hotel room for 2 days. So I'm looking for an 8406 Eaton 6-speed and a Divorce 205, but haven't run across one yet. And build an even more bomb-proof setup. I'm running a Hamilton cam, and it allows me to run the second gen 12-valve lift pump on this 24-valve block. So yeah, I am running the old piston style pump on there, and it's producing about 20 to 30 psi of pressure, about 30 running down the highway and about 20 in an idle. So I wouldn't go back in a heartbeat at all. The grid heaters are all fired off these old starter solenoids over here, and most of the wiring is in that Halidex box over there. So again, with the old 6.2, there really wasn't much for wiring, and with this current setup, which I'll explain the alternator over here in a second, there's only one wire. It comes from the alternator to the battery to charge. The throttle, I had to fabricate a throttle cable. So I had to fabricate a throttle assembly down in here. I didn't have the money at the time for the shut-off solenoid, so we ended up just using an old choke cable. And again, running the AN line braided stainless out of Summit, along with that second gen lift pump way back in there. So both the return and the supply line are AN, running all the way to and from the tank. A little something on the bracketry side of things. I used what's called a high mount alternator kit. Now they won't, you walk into Cummins and then ask for that mount system, they're not going to be able to find it for you because there's no actual name on it. What happens is this plate that's on the side of the block down here gets swapped out, and then you have an extra nipple for your water line system. That moves, for those that are doing this swap in old Chevys, that moves that air conditioner compressor back up into this alcove right here. It moves it up out of the frame rail for you. The problem with that system is as you can see down here, it puts your belt tensioner right up there against the side of the frame rail. So what I did recently here is I figured out a way to get around that. And right now I've pulled the setup off of this engine and got it on a mock-up engine up in the house that I'm working on for 4BT and my wife's Suburban. This alternator is not a Dodge alternator. This is a 22 SI Delco, commonly found in like Freightliners, Kenworths, and so on. It's internally regulated, so no need for the little add-on box somewhere else. With this bracket setup, this upper arm can be modified in two ways. One, for the 24 valve, you had to cut out around through here to get past the water neck. Secondly, I don't know if you can see it, but back in here, I took the 4BT style bracket, welded it to this arm, and that allows me to run the 4BT tensioner up here where it's fairly easy to get to, and put the tensioner here instead of down on the frame rail where it resides down below. Also allows me to run a shorter belt. So again, like I said, that setup is off on another engine right now while I'm mocking it up, getting it ready to go. Take a minute to interject right here and fully explain that bracket system I was pointing out on the truck down there. Okay, this is on a 4BT, and On a 4BT, they run a different water neck right here. Kind of looks like this, and it pops out and brings your water neck right here. So this bracket doesn't exist. What I've done is combine two different bracket systems here. The 4BT version runs this block right here, and then the high mount system, like off the old F700s and all, runs this, the 22SI Delco alternator, and this plate down here, along with this side engine mount bracket, and the alternative water nipple out here. But by doing the high mount system, you end up running your belt tensioner down here, up against the frame rail, like I pointed out on my truck a few minutes ago. Problem with this is, and this is what happened to me, is down next to the frame rail, torquing, hauling a trailer across country, I ended up in Tennessee. That's a long ways from home at this point. Thankfully, I'm originally from Western North Carolina, so I only had about 300 more miles to go. But my frame rail contacted this bracket down here in torquing through those hills, and it sheared off one of the two bolts that holds this in. So the last 300 miles I'm sitting here going home on baling wire, duct tape, ratchet straps, and bungee cords, holding this bracket in place, hoping that I could make it into my buddy's house. Well, we did. But that got me to thinking, I need to come up with a better way of doing this. Also, when you got a fan and a fan shroud bolted in here, getting to this tensioner way down here in the bottom is a pain in the rear. You can't get enough of an arm on it, like a 1/2 inch ratchet, etc., to be able to get it moved over to get all your belts undone the way you need to. So, that's what led me to what I'm working on here. What I did down there, and as you saw a second ago, I combined these two brackets. Basically, I took this one and welded it to this one, so it's just one solid bracket through there. That allows me to run this 4BT style tensioner up on top where it's easy to get to. And you can get a wrench on it, get it opened up so you can get to your belts without having to climb down to the bottom. Now, what this ends up doing on a 4-cylinder 4BT like this one, with that water neck sticking out, it's a little bit of a mess. So stay tuned to my channel. What I'm working on right now, and we're kind of trying to get into the prototype stages, and build an adapter right here that allows me to use the water neck off of a 24 valve, notch this out, and set that puppy in there just like that. So the thermostats are close enough where it should be able to work. But like I said, once you get that through the prototype stage, I'll probably be putting a link up on it and hopefully get something into production. But regardless, running this 22SI alternator up here with this belt system and combining these two brackets, if you wanted to have one plasma cut out, that's another way, the same thing. But anyhow, that's the bracket system that I came up with, and so far it's been working pretty doggone well on my old truck down there. And it is a daily driver, and it's gone to hell and back a couple of times. So, Rich, thanks for doing the IQCS car show. I'm sure it's bringing a lot of us guys out of the woodwork to not necessarily show off our rides, but to share our information, share our knowledge with each other. So, because I know I can learn from somebody else, and hence that's probably why I started watching the Deboss Garage channel. So, anyways, appreciate it, guys. Take care of yourselves, and I'll get back to the truck in the front yard and finish up with it. Thanks. Alright, guys, so that's a tour of my old ride. So, big hearty welcome from Northeast Wyoming, where, yeah, it's snowing, it's raining. Maybe later today the sun will shine. But appreciate the chance to jump in on the car show, as we don't have too many of them up in this part of the country anyways. But we appreciate it, and we'll gladly contribute. Rich, if you need a Wyoming license plate to kind of add to your wall swag, maybe I can accommodate you there. You know, we gotta spread the bucking horse, because the world needs more cowboys. Thanks, guys. Take care. Thanks for watching. Check out my channel at Rough Cut Ranch, where we get into more projects down the highway. So long.